demographic funding, which includes services such as screening, expansion of the ambulance service, and a specific £10 million for hospital pressures. Decisions will be taken shortly in relation to prioritising need in relation to this funding, and this will be done on the basis of current productivity and performance in managing existing resources. The needs and issues highlighted by the acute services in Mayo, which you have spoken about here today, will of course be taken into account in consideration in the consideration in the process of allocating that funding. I am happy to note the Deputy acknowledged that the provision of care in other settings can facilitate the better use of acute hospital resources, and I want to assure this House and new Deputy that decisions relating to funding of all services do seek to address efficiently the needs of individuals and their carers. So thank you for raising this topic, and I will bring it to the attention of the Minister for Health.
Deputy Mulhern has 2 minutes.
Thank you,
supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for that response, and I'm glad that it speaks to the concern, which is these ongoing trolley numbers in Mayo General, owing to the blockages, owing to the lack of the step-down facility. I would suggest strongly and urge that an urgent case has been made for Mayo General for some of this €10 million funding to relieve hospital pressures. Money, we would be getting better value for money to have patients who are suitable for the step-down facilities out of the expensive medical beds and into the step-down facilities. And indeed, I would suggest that by simply reopening 12 beds in Bellina District Hospital, it would make an absolutely massive contribution towards solving this problem. And in light of the fact that decisions in relation to prioritisation are imminent, I'd ask that this view be taken in relation to those beds, and that real support is given to management there, who I am satisfied from my regular dealings with them are really trying their best and are trying to go with the spirit of the intention of the Minister, which is to solve this problem in a creative type of way. Thank you.
Now call the Minister for concluding remarks.
Just to say, I will bring the particular points that you've made to the attention of the Minister for Health, Minister Riley. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes topical issues. We now go on to the Finance, Local Property Tax Amendment Bill 2013 committee stage. So I first go on to Section 1. That Section 1 stand part of the bill. But on Section 1, Deputy McGrath.
Just if I may, last Karen Corley, in speaking to Section 1 of the bill, ask the Minister to engage in this process in an open way and to genuinely consider the sensible proposals that have been put down by members of the opposition. The way that this House has been treated in respect of this bill and indeed the bill that we are amending, the one which passed the House before Christmas, is an absolute disgrace in my view. There are many very genuine issues that need to be teased out in some detail. If you take, for example, Minister, the Finance Bill, which we will spend the next 3 days debating in committee, in a measured and in a considered way and in a professional way, why can't we apply the same level of responsible parliamentary behaviour in dealing with this bill? This bill affects every single household in the country, and I would ask you, Minister, even at this very late stage, and you haven't shown any willingness to date to consider any of the amendments that we have put forward, and I hope you will prove me wrong, but here we are now at 7:05. This debate will finish at 7:30, resume at 9 o'clock until 10:30. We have less than 2 hours of a debate to deal with 67 amendments put forward by members of the opposition to deal with one of the most important pieces of legislation that this House will consider in this Oireachtas term. And one of the key issues that I will be raising during the course of the couple of hours that we have is the issue of ability to pay, the issue of fairness. There has not been in any way adequate consideration given to the needs of people who are struggling with mortgage arrears, people who are trapped in negative equity, people who have paid high levels of stamp duty or development contributions to local authorities in recent years, or indeed people who simply, through no fault of their own, are in low-income households. And the thresholds that have been set, even for a deferral, are in no way adequate. And I would just say to you, Minister, that clearly you're not for turning on the overall principle of introducing a property tax, and that be as it may. We have an obligation on all sides of the House to seek to improve the measures that you are introducing. And I have no doubt that, having read through all of the amendments that have been put forward by a variety of deputies in this House, that some of those amendments, if implemented, would certainly make the property tax fairer, would certainly introduce in a meaningful way an assessment of a person's ability to pay, and would take into account the other obligations and commitments that they have. That's all that I will say at the outset. Last Corla, we have very limited time. I want it to be a meaningful debate where we can deal with the amendments that are put down, and I hope the Minister is of the mind to accept the more sensible ones that have been put forward.
Deputy Joe Higgins.
Last Corla, the crushing by the government of any adequate time for debating this property tax compounds the lack of any democratic credibility for this legislation. The reality is that the property tax has not a shred of democratic legitimacy. Fine Gael, the majority party in government, categorically ruled out a property tax in its 2011 election manifesto, when it said a recurring residential property tax is unfair. And the Labour Party also ruled out the property tax as now to be implemented. Therefore, we have a blatant perversion of truthfulness by the two main parties of government in front of the ordinary people of this state in coming here and doing an about-face and implementing this very savage austerity tax, which will quickly, with water, grow to €1,000 per annum. Now, next week, the revenue commissioners, which have been given responsibility by the government to implement this odious tax, will be sending nearly 2 million letters to every house in the state. And I'm saying quite categorically there should be a wholesale rejection by the big majority of householders, by everybody out there, of any demand by revenue to make returns or to give any information whatsoever. There should be a mass boycott of all aspects of this illegitimate tax being undemocratically foisted on the people. And a massive movement of people power and of workers' power is needed to overturn what is a huge attack on living standards and a huge attack on people of middle and low income on behalf of the bailout agenda for the European financial institutions on the diktats of the Troika. Now, if 500,000 households, 1 million homes or more, organise and refuse to cooperate and boycott this tax and bring their massive opposition to the parties of government in a campaign of political public pressure, they can break this tax. And this tax should be overturned and should be broken, and it's a legitimate law, and it's legitimate for people to refuse that law and to fly in the face of that law and to defy that law with mass people power and worker power between now and the demand for the returns at the end of May, and to carry that if the government dares to deduct a single cent from either the social welfare or from the wages of workers. That opposition should be carried right through with industrial action in workplaces if there was a dare to deduct and so on. That is the only legitimate response to a tax that has no democratic credibility and provides for a huge attack, an insupportable attack on the living standards, on the incomes of the poor, of the unemployed, of low and of middle income workers in our society.
The next speaker is Deputy Catherine Murphy. Just to say there are 5 speakers now and
I'll try and keep
6, and
try and keep
we're on
it brief.
section We're on section 1, the definition.
And that's the nub of the problem, in that there is such an inadequate amount of time. Some of us went to the trouble of framing amendments in good faith, but there isn't good faith to deal with them. Even the name of this Finance Local Property Tax Amendment Bill, belies what's intended, because I can't see any evidence where there's anything local about it. It's not raised locally, and the amount of money that will be spent will be replacing money that has been withdrawn from the local government fund. So there will be no additional services provided to people. It's radically different to what happens in other countries, in that local property tax is raised locally. People know what they're paying for. And I think that is worlds apart from what's been described here. In relation to, I had hoped that things like, for example, that we know are going to jump up and bite because they're not being properly thought about. For example, the area where people have made modifications to their homes, sometimes with and sometimes without a grant from the local authority for a disabled person. I've come across situations where they've had to wait so long that there's been a fundraiser done in the local community for a family. That family won't qualify because they didn't get a grant, because they would have had to wait too long. There's worlds of a difference in how it's administered at the various local authorities, and that's something that did require scrutiny for a particular cohort of people who are very vulnerable. I think there's major difficulties with what's been proposed in relation to pyrite, for example, where it may mean that a household would have to expend sometimes 3 times the amount of what the property tax demand is, just to have their house tested to prove that they have pyrite in the order that they would be exempted. So there's a number of things that we can identify at this stage that are, even leaving aside the principle of property tax, that are going to be problematic in terms of the fair application of this. Without sufficient time to debate this, I think that is going to give us that's going to obviously cause problems into the future. We can't ignore the fact that 1.8 million households, according to the credit union movement, are that only have something like €100 of disposable income a month to live on. There is a very significant cohort of people who simply won't be able to pay this tax, and deferring what will be an amount that will incur interest is just plain wrong. So I'll just leave it at that and hope to get some opportunity to talk to some of the issues.
Now call Deputy Pearse Doherty.
Minister, what we're doing here is an affront to democracy. There's no doubt about it, and there's been a lot said earlier on in relation to what's going on this evening. But this is the second piece of legislation on this property tax, and you've done exactly the same thing with this piece of legislation that was done in the previous legislation. You know fine well that while we had time, and I give it that, it's particularly the lead spokesperson had time to debate this at second stage. Where we want to get into the nitty-gritty of this is at committee stage. We're here dealing with section 1 and addressing the bill in section 1, which is just the title of the bill, because we know fine well that we're not actually going to get to the amendments that we've tabled that covers many of the sections of this bill. You know very clearly where Sinn Féin stands in this tax. We're completely opposed to it, and we make no bones about it. We're not saying it's the wrong time or the wrong tax. It's simply a family home tax should not be imposed on the people of this state, and Sinn Féin are committed to having this tax repealed. We believe that the only way to actually avoid, for people to avoid paying this tax, is to have this tax repealed. And I will continue both inside and outside this chamber to try and enlist support so that there is a popular demand, and that we can have, hopefully, a future government that will bring this type of legislation, which will have a drastic effect on people right across this state, on their disposable incomes, on their well-being, indeed in some cases on their mental health. And just mention that I recall a phone call to the office where somebody in mortgage distress, and this goes to the nub in terms of mortgage distress, because there's nothing in this bill that will bring any alleviation to the 180,000 people that are suffering through mortgage distress and all the different turmoils that they face. But I recall one of my staff in my office telling me about a phone call that she received where the husband was recalling to her just the fact that the wife is crying basically all the time because they can't get out of this turmoil that they're in terms of mortgage distress and the thoughts of losing their home or the thoughts of not being able to pay their bills and all of that pressure it brings to bear on people. And one night he told the girl in the office that he just went upstairs, he gathered whatever coins he could get together and went down to her and gave her the money and asked her to go out and get something for herself. And we talk about people in mental health, we talk about people who've taken their own lives in the past, we talk about the effects that different decisions have on society, but there's no doubt about it, Minister, I've no doubt about it that you yourself are not going to blink an eyelid when you get the letter from the Revenue. Indeed, your Taoiseach isn't going to blink an eyelid. How would you, on the salaries that you're on? It's just another cheque that has to be written. It's, another letter that has to be posted to the Revenue. It means nothing. It means nothing to you. It won't put you up or down. But for the vast majority of people, and I can genuinely say vast majority of people out there, it is a very big consideration that they're going to have to face in the next days and weeks in front of us. And there's no doubt about it, from Monday on, when the postman starts to deliver these letters from the Revenue, there's going to be houses across the state that is dreading the rattle of the letterbox. They're going to be dreading the rattle of the letterbox to see this envelope coming through, another bill on that family who have probably been sitting around the table and doing the figures and doing the sums and how can we afford this and how can we afford that and which bill will we prioritise and which bill will we let go, and hopefully we'll try and catch up on that one later on. And this comes with the harshness of the revenue stamp, and not only just the revenue stamp, but by God, if you aren't in a position to pay this, and you're not one of the ones who can get a deferral, then, the big boys in government are coming after you, and we're coming after you through your social welfare payment, if you're lucky enough to be unemployed and receipt of social welfare, or if you're a farmer and dependent on reps payment or your area aid, we'll come after you in that there, so that the income that you were expecting to get to make sure that your animals were kept fed during the bad winter would be reduced. Or worse again, we'll dip into your bank account. We'll dip into your bank account, and the money that you thought was there to pay for your mortgage or to pay certain bills will be taken from you by the state, because come hell or high water, we're going to get our pound of flesh, is the message from this government. Minister, this is a very unfair and unjust tax. And I repeat what I've said on many, many occasions. There is different ways to bring in revenue. You know that, I know that, there's different options. And, every option when we're talking about bringing in additional taxation is going to affect somebody. It's going to affect somebody, it'll hurt them. Some people it hurts more than others. But this type of blatant, every single person who has a roof over their head has to pay a tax based on the value, not on the value of their home, to tell you the truth, because for many people, as I've said before, this is a charge on a liability. It's a charge on debt. And you know that people are swimming under a pool of debt. They're drowning under a sea of debt. You know the figures as well as I do. Property prices has lost their value by 55% in the last couple of years. Indeed, just this week there was an auction here in Dublin. There was a property in Donegal that was up for auction. Don't know who the owner is, but I'm sure that the mortgage they had on that property was more than 25,000, which was the reserve price for the apartment in Letterkenny, and the apartment wasn't even sold. People are just suffering under a massive sea of debt, and this year is just going to add to the burden. Minister, even at this late, and I think I'm talking to a brick wall here in relation to yourselves. I genuinely cannot get over how quickly you lost touch. Fianna Fáil, they lost touch gradually. They lost touch gradually, and it accelerated probably in the boom years where they lost complete control of themselves. But you're in government 2 years, It's 2 years this time that you entered this chamber with your big, hang out your brightest colours. 2 years later, your brightest colours are coming in the form of envelopes that will be posted by the revenue through hundreds of thousands of doors that will bring nothing but misery, hardship, pain and more suffering to individuals that you have promised to try and lift from the burden and from the terrible situation that you as a government inherited. Minister, it's a flawed piece of legislation. I mentioned earlier on in my second stage speech that there are some things that are positive, there are some things that are negative, but in reality, Minister, even the types of exemptions that you're trying to trumpet as a huge success, like the pirate, pirate will be exempt. Like, who's kidding who? Like, who really is kidding who? If I own a pirate house, and if you want to deal with the section of the original bill, what is the chargeable value of a house, Minister? What does the legislation say at the minute? The chargeable value of a house is what you are deemed to be able to get as a fair market value if you were to sell your house on the liability date. If I own a pirate house, do you think I'm going to get anything for that house? It will not be sold. There is no value in it. The same way that the apartment in Letterkenny, which isn't pirate affected, wouldn't even be sold for $25,000. A pirate house has no value at this point in time. So therefore, giving an exemption to a pirate house makes absolutely no sense, because 2%, 10%, 50%, 90% of the value of a pirate house is still zero. It will not sell in the market today. So those type of exemptions are simply, are nothing more than kind of trying to dress this issue up as if you've really tackled the issue of the tens of thousands of homes that are affected by pirate. And the same goes in terms of the disability, and we're not even going to get to that section. It's something I genuinely, passionately believe in, given a family experience. My late uncle, who had to put an adaptation onto their house and cost a lot of money, the community responded many, many years ago. But I've been in many houses where adaptations had to be made to their house. Yet this here, which is nothing but, again, another fig leaf, will address some people, but won't address others because it is means tested, or it was based on a grant that you had to avail of that was means tested at the time, and it's only a portion of the value of what was actually done at the time. And I think that's mean. It's cruel in terms of people who, for no fault of their own, I recall one, and I'm sure the mother won't. One person, I'm sure she won't object to me mentioning it, but one fella who had a terrible accident. He was a fisherman, lived out in the island, and it was when I started off in politics, we had a fundraising for him to help him adapt the house. But I know the guy. I've been out visiting him a number of times, and there's an adaptation to the house, and he's lying there. He's lying there constantly, like he can't walk, can't move, paralysed. And the mother looks after him all the time. The mother suffered as a result of cuts that's been inflicted not just by your own party and government, but by the previous government. But that was an adaptation that had to be made, not because the mother wanted it, not because they wanted an extra room or an extra bathroom. It's because the son had to be cared for. And if the adaptation wasn't made in that island, in that house on that island, then the son would have to be put into long-term residential care. Yet you, under this legislation, even with the amendment that you're bringing forward, will still not address that concerns because it's based on the income that the family had at the time, or if they didn't apply for the grant, then they basically don't get an exemption for that. So there are things that we're not even going to get touching on, and I appreciate to allow to touch on some of that, because it's really annoying that despite our complete and utter opposition to this legislation, that there are amendments that we've brought forward that I think are sensible. I think that if you had genuine time to hear and discuss and thrash them out, that you may have a second look at, but that's not going to be facilitated given the fact that you and your cabinet colleagues and party members from Fine Gael and Labour has voted tonight to quash debate on this piece of legislation.
I'll call Deputy Clare Daly.
Thanks, Ceann Comhairle. I'll be brief, seeing as we have very, very little time. And I have to say there is a sickening feeling of deja vu about this session. It is a carbon copy of the charade that went on here before Christmas, where the Minister sat nodding off. This side of the House was allowed vent its spleen a bit. Nobody was present from the government benches, and then they came in like sheep later on to foist the original bill on us. And here we are again, only a matter of weeks after this. And I have to say, it is galling to have been here on Friday and see a line of backbenchers, particularly Fine Gael ones, shedding crocodile tears about houses in Dublin or houses with pyrite or people on low incomes, the very issues that we have tabled amendments around tonight that we are not going to get a chance to discuss in any way. It makes an absolute mockery of this spectacle here, and I'm not actually interested in playing the game in here, because the reality is that this battle and this game will be sorted out outside of here, where people aren't going to put up with the waffle and rubbish that's coming out of here because they simply cannot afford to pay what is being put on their shoulders. But I do want to have the opportunity to expose government backbenchers tonight who made false promises on the issue of pyrite, that they'd give people an exemption, who shed crocodile tears for people on low income, but yet who passed a piece of legislation that is more draconian than anything else that has been on our statute books to allow you to go in and put your paws into the pockets of lowly paid workers. Now, obviously, your bill tonight is designed to take some of the sting out of the original proposition, but I have to say it fails miserably in that regard, precisely because it makes no reference whatsoever to ability to pay. And the very reason why he fought an election with a manifesto which said, don't vote for us and we won't bring in a home tax, because people who own homes can be asset rich but cash poor, or they can be young people struggling with negative equity. And all of these people you've rewarded by them voting for you by imposing the opposite of what you said you would do. Now, we have table motions tonight to take account of those people and to exclude them from the net. Obviously, we don't agree with a home tax at all. It is patently unfair, particularly when you had many other avenues. You could have increased corporation tax just a tad. You could have slightly increased income tax on the high earners, and you would have got just as much, if not more, as you are about imposing this further austerity on ordinary people. Ye chose not to do that. But I want your backbenchers to have the choice to vote on our amendments tonight. So I'd like to know, before the session breaks and before we have to come back later on, where do the amendments stand? We don't know at this stage which of our amendments are being allowed, which of them are being ruled out of order. I think the least you can do is give us the respect of allowing us to know that before we come back after this session convenes.
Deputy Richard Boyd Barrett.
Thanks, Last Ciaran Corley. Minister, this government should be utterly ashamed of itself for what it is doing and the way in which it is trampling on the democratic process. At the best of times, huge numbers of people in this country have now got little respect for politics and less respect for this institution. And what you are doing, contrary to the promises that you made prior to taking office, is bringing this institution further into disrepute. If there was any hope for conventional politics, it is fast disappearing down the drain because of the utter, deliberate, manipulative, smug cynicism that accompanies the way this government has started to do business, particularly over the last six months or so. The way in which you smile as you ride roughshod over the what should be proper democratic oversight and scrutiny of legislation that will affect every citizen pretty much in this state and will impose further suffering on hundreds of thousands of families who can't take any more, and that you won't even allow that to be properly discussed, debated, and for deputies on all sides of the House to put forward amendments and alternative proposals is utterly shameful. Utterly shameful. And of course, the reason that you don't want a proper debate on this bill, and the same way you didn't want a proper debate on the bill before Christmas, and just to mention, the same way as you don't want a debate on the water services bill, the next stage is the water services bill, which you've guillotined next week is because you claim it's fair, you claim it's progressive, but you know that any serious examination and scrutiny of this bill will make it absolutely clear that it is not fair and it is not progressive, that it is cruelly unfair. And it seems designed to be so. And despite the fact that this has been debated much on the national airwaves, and questions have been asked again and again by the opposition in here, you refuse to answer the most basic questions about this bill. How will somebody who is not able to pay their mortgage pay this tax?
Deputy, could I ask you to move that the debate be adjourned?
I so move.
Come on.
No, we're moving straight on to this. Now we're moving on. We're moving on to private. Well,
Everything in the bill is because I was listening to you when we debated it before Christmas. Everything is an amendment to ease the situation along the lines of your advice.
okay.
You're not prepared to have a proper. You're not prepared to have a proper committee. You just can't stand it.
Please, Billy Keller has the floor.
Thank you very much.
Deputy Keller.
I move the motion in the name of the Fianna Fáil deputies on the private members' business health insurance costs. I suppose I move this motion, Minister, because quite simply, over the last number of years, there's been massive increases in private health insurance costs. It is creating huge difficulties out there in the context of families, first of all, dropping out of health insurance, lowering the actual benefits that they have in terms of the various portfolios that are being outlined by health insurers, but critically and more importantly, the sustainability of the private health insurance market itself. And that, Minister, is a clear difficulty that you have. And it's a difficulty of your own making in many respects. There is no doubt when you look at the inflation costs of private health insurance, there are many multiples of broader consumer price index inflation and of health sector inflation itself. Health insurance premia have gone through the roof in the last number of years. And for that reason, I think it is critically important that the Minister takes a strong, hard look at its policies and at its legislative framework base in underpinning its move towards universal health insurance. And critically, Minister, at this particular stage, and we have spoken about this in this House on numerous occasions, and I just do not believe you understand the difficulties out there with families, first of all, dropping out of health insurance. The numbers are there. The HAI, again, or the Health Insurance Authority of Ireland, again, outlined that over 70,000 people left health insurance in 2012. Now, the Minister, only 2 years ago, when 34,000 people left health insurance, described it as a crisis, was apoplectic here with rage, frothing at the back teeth on a continual basis about the need for strategic policies around the whole issue of private health insurance. And since then, nothing has happened, only the opposite, if the truth be told. The legislative base that has been underpinning it in terms of risk equalisation has, and you're aware of this, Minister, there was meant to be non-advanced plans. There is no non-advanced plan. So all the people who are paying the lower benefit schemes of private health insurance will now be subsidising, as was outlined at the Health Committee only a number of weeks ago by the health insurers themselves, that the people who can afford only the basic plans and the basic cover will now be subsidising those with the Rolls-Royce private health insurance. Now, that clearly is unjust. It's clearly unfair. And I think, Minister, you have to rethink this very, very quickly. The Minister, when he was taking the second stage of the risk equalisation bill inside here last year, outlined that there would be non-advanced plans available and that they would be exempt from the higher levy. That was clearly the import of his statement in this Dáil. We were led to believe by the Health Insurance Authority of Ireland that there would be about 47 non-advanced plans. But lo and behold, the legislation was passed and we now find that there is no non-advanced plans. So clearly what we're asking people who are hanging on by their fingertips in terms of retaining private health insurance, that to retain and stay at the lower level, you're going to have to drop benefits. You're going to have to drop, maybe say, day case procedures, for example, MRI scans, that you'll now have to pay for that yourself. because the health insurers have told us quite clearly that benefits will have to be taken out of the present plans to ensure they qualify for the non-advanced plan. And by extension, you are now asking those people that have to make choices whether or not they will fill the tank of oil, pay the gas bill, or pay their insurance, that they must now subsidise the person who has a €4,000 premium health insurance every year and is staying in the 5-star hotel type of accommodation. That clearly is unjust. And you have to look at that. I mean, if you're not understanding that, the advice you're getting from the authority, the advice you're getting from your officials, clearly is at variance with the facts out there in the market itself. And the 4 insurers have stated this quite clearly, that this will be the result of the risk equalisation levy and the fact that there's now no non-advanced plans available to the many families who are struggling on a daily basis. Minister, health insurance is something that every party and government over the years has encouraged people to take out. The support in terms of tax allowance for your VHI for many, many years is still there in case for your premium. So there has been a policy of encouraging people to take out private health insurance. Now what we're asking those very people that have been paying private health insurance for families' generations, since the VHI was first founded way back, we're now saying to them that the new legislation to redesignate public beds, to redesignate the beds in the hospitals, that you're now saying that if you are referred to emergency department to any public hospital in this country, the policy is now stating that you will be charged. You will be charged. Health insurance customers will foot the bill to be treated in a public hospital that they've already funded through their general taxation, without any extra benefits. Without any extra benefits. And that simply is something that's completely unacceptable. That you are now asking a person that has worked, made sacrifices in terms of paying their health insurance, and contribute to the central exchequer that funds public hospitals, that when they go to the emergency department and they find a private health insurance card inside in their pocket, that they will be charged indirectly because the health insurance companies will foot the bill, which will be passed on to private health insurance customers. That is simply an unacceptable low practice of funding the health services in this country. It's a double taxation. That's exactly what it is. It's another mean attack on Middle Ireland. And that is something that you genuinely have to go back and look at. And he factored this last year into your accounts, he factored it this year into your accounts. And I'm just saying, at this late stage, don't go down this road of double taxing people who work hard, who try to lighten the burden of this state in providing health care, that they will now have to pay for it twice over when they enter a public hospital. And that is a stated policy. In fact, Minister, in your motion, you give yourselves a big slap on the back for double taxing people who barely can afford health insurance as it is, endorses the government's policy of generating additional income for public hospitals by addressing the present subsidy enjoyed by health insurers. It's not a subsidy to health insurers. It's basically what it is doing is the health insurers will have to pass the cost on to those that are consumers of private health insurance. That's what it is. It is not a subsidy. Health insurance companies are obligated to run a surplus. They cannot run deficits. That is the regulations they work under with the central bank. So they're obligated to pass these costs directly back to the consumers. The basic policyholders are already finding it difficult to hold on to the very low plans that the health insurers are offering. So this particular issue is a nasty tax and a double tax on Middle Ireland. And I am genuinely urging that she would revisit this as quickly as is possible. Now, there's one other issue, Minister, that we have raised on numerous occasions. There is no doubt when you look at the figures, if you look at the figures, what is happening out there in the market is that the younger, healthy people are opting out of private health cover. They're no longer taking up private health insurance, or they're dropping their plans, or they're removing themselves completely. And the demographics show that we now have an increased number of people on the other end of the scale. Now, if we are to have intergenerational solidarity, and if we are to have one generation contributing to the welfare of another generation, as is community rating, everybody's bought into it. We have to have some lifetime community rating to encourage young people into the private health insurance market. They're dropping out in droves. The figures are there, as was published by the Health Insurance Authority. In 2008, people between the age of 18 and 29, there was 334,000 people. The last year, there was 267,000. A massive drop. If you go to the other end of the scale, those 60 to 69, there was 94,000. Sorry, 185,000. And in 2011, there was 207,000. Now that shows that it is completely unsustainable. The market that you are pretending is out there, that will provide vibrancy and competition when universal health insurance is imposed on the people, without any great discussion so far, may I say, because we're still waiting for the model, that famous model. We're still waiting for the Commission on Universal Health Insurance to publish its findings. But in the meantime, this particular policy of laissez-faire when it comes to encouraging people into health insurance simply is untenable. And what it is doing long term, it is jeopardising elderly people. It is jeopardising sick people, because there will not be a healthy sway of young people taking up private health insurance to cross-subsidise those that most need it. So, in my short 10 minutes, I'm asking you to reconsider those three issues that I've spoken about, and I will be elaborating more fulsomely tomorrow evening. But this particular motion that you've laid before the House is a farcical exercise in the extreme in slapping yourselves on the back for single-handedly destroying private health insurance in this country and driving over 140,000 people out of the market since you took up government.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. Now, Deputy Robert Troy, you 10 minutes.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Cathaoirleach, can I welcome the opportunity to contribute to this important debate tonight on the spiralling costs of private health insurance in our country, and I commend my party colleague Deputy Billy Kelleher for bringing forward this motion. The high costs associated with health insurance is having a devastating and detrimental effect on households across this country, both young and old. And this is despite the programme for government's commitment to say that it would act speedily to reduce the costs in the delivery of both public and private health care. This simply has not occurred, and the situation has continued to deteriorate during Minister Riley's tenure in the Department of Health. The statistics are stark and cannot be defended by the government or by the minister. According to the Health Insurance Authority, there were 2,099,000 people with inpatient health insurance plans at the end of December 2012. This represents a reduction of 64,000 policyholders in 2012, and that followed on a reduction of 65,000 people in 2011. According to the CSO data from April 2012, the percentage of the population with inpatient insurance has fallen from a peak in 2008 of 50.9% to 45.8%. This series of alarming statistics are compounded further by the Minister for Health's staggering lack of progress on his trophy policy, the introduction of the universal health insurance. In fact, when the Minister for Health had an opportunity to support a measure which would have extended free GP care to all newborn children in 2013, as outlined in the Fianna Fáil's pre-budget submission, a fair awaited recovery, he declined. This policy would have gone some way towards meeting the government's long-delayed commitment to providing free GP care. This was a missed opportunity. However, not only are the number of policyholders with private health insurance continually falling, but a more worrying trend is the high proportion of young people and families who have been priced out of the market and have abandoned their health insurance cover. This is the core demographic which health insurance providers should be targeting for both their own sustainability and for the very future of the industry. For the period 2008 to 2011, the number of over 50s with inpatient health insurance increased by a further 50,000, while those under 50, the policy numbers fell by 122,000. The main reason for this is that young people and families who have suffered greatly under the recession can no longer afford to purchase health insurance. The four insurance providers operating in the market, VHI, Lele, Aviva and Glow Health have all increased their cost of their policies and premiums over the period through a never-ending series of price hikes. For example, Glow Health, which has only been in the market for less than a year, has increased the premiums for their core plans, outpatient-only plans and cash plans on the 30th of January this year and the 2nd of February this year. Young people with families have been left with two choices: give up their health insurance entirely or downgrade their health insurance cover. The knock-on effects have resulted in health insurers increasing their prices for loyal customers to cover the gap and in effect pricing a second group out of the market. Yet, the Minister for Health seems unconcerned and indifferent to this growing crisis. How can customers realistically shop around when the four insurers in the market are continually hiking their prices? This position is simply untenable, and the Minister will have to intervene. The lack of concern shown by the Minister for Health is in sharp contrast to the criticisms he labelled at the previous government in 2011 over the then price increase. He spoke of the last straw for struggling families, and he claimed would lead to an increased demand on the public hospital system. Yet now, when the Minister has an opportunity to do something, he doesn't even consider the proposal for his department to research the impact of patients presenting in public hospitals who had previously had private health insurance. But then again, this is not the first time that we've seen evidence of Minister Riley's dramatic transformation from his time in opposition to when he entered government. The concern remains inaction is adopted the policy approach. A policy of wait and see is simply not good enough from the Minister. In fact, instead of stopping the hemorrhaging of consumers from the health insurance market, the trend has actually accelerated during this government's term of office. The situation can be reversed if the Minister for Health takes on board a number of recommendations. Firstly, the Minister needs to protect the 330,000 health insurance customers with lower levels of cover from another increase in the government's health insurance levy in March. The Minister needs to renew his commitment to adopt a two-tier levy system for those with advanced and non-advanced cover. The Health Insurance Authority, when examining the Health Insurance Amendment Act 2012, has classified all of the plans of the market as not conforming to the Minister's definition of non-advanced. As a result, all policies are categorised as advanced and subject to a higher rate of levy. Minister, you need to urgently revisit and revise the legal definition of non-advanced plan. If the current situation is not rectified, an individual paying €500 for a lower level plan, a very basic plan, will pay the same levy as someone who can afford to pay €4,000 for a Rolls-Royce plan. This raises fundamental questions with regard to the equity and fairness, where those on lower levels of cover are being asked to subsidise those on higher levels of health insurance policy. The Government needs to defer the increase in the health levy due at the end of March until a new definition for non-advanced plans is agreed. The health insurance levy has already increased by nearly 80% since its introduction 4 years ago. The CSO has also reported that health insurance premiums has risen by 60% during this same period. Minister, children should be removed from the health levy as a matter of priority. Young families who are hard-pressed during this recession need a break. Intergenerational solidarity should be confined to those 18 years and over. Only last year, the country passed a children's referendum to strengthen children's rights in our Constitution. How is it fair or equitable that the Government should expect children to support older and single persons' health insurance costs through paying this levy? Simply put, a levy on children needs to be urgently abolished. The Government needs to tackle the VHI and how it operates. The Government has an important say as its senior shareholder on how the agency operates. In 2005, the VHI had 1.7 million customers. Today, the figure is 1.2 million. Yet the number of staff has increased during that period. If that was a private company, it had gone bust, out of business. The government needs to ensure that patients who have private health insurance and pay their taxes do not lose their universal entitlement to public health care funded by the state. The increased cost in public hospital charges, including the proposed additional hospital bed charge and their impact on the cost of private health insurances, needs to be addressed. If the government ignores the concerns of the insurers and the industry, they will in effect undermine the sustainability of the health insurance market. The phased introduction of a lifetime community rating. Such a move could be used to encourage younger people into the market and to purchase health insurance. The prohibition on insurance negotiating with public hospitals need to be lifted. At present, only insurers can negotiate a package with private hospitals. There is also a discrepancy in the length of stay for VHI customers in private and public hospitals, which needs to be addressed, 5 days and 7 days respectively. Surely greater savings could be achieved if the insurers were allowed to negotiate with public hospitals. As a means of lowering costs in the industry, insurers need to work together with the support of the Department of Health to develop industry standards, clinical pathways. Such a move would lead to the delivery of quality health care being provided to customers in the most efficient manner. The Government and the Minister for Health needs to urgently address the issues as set out to ensure the sustainability of private health insurance market in this country. The people of Ireland deserve better than the level of incompetence evident within the Department of Health and the Minister.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. Now I call upon Deputy Charlie McConnell. You have 10 minutes.
And I'd like to join with Deputy Troy in commending our health spokesperson, Billy Kelleher, for putting forward this very important motion here tonight. Health insurance has been one of the payments and the family payments which families have struggled to try and ensure that at all costs they would actually keep up with as their finances have got more and more tighter since this recession kicked in. And I, like many deputies in this House, will have come across many families who have explained to me that their mortgage and their health insurance have been the two key things which they've struggled to try and ensure that their family would keep. And for many, unfortunately, the reality has been that that struggle has got too difficult. And since this government has come into office, Minister, and indeed the trend has started well before that as well, many people have continued to leave health insurance. Unfortunately, your Senior Minister and indeed your government team have failed miserably so far to actually grapple and grasp this issue and bring a halt to the slide in health insurance, the number of people with health insurance. We have a Minister now and a government who promised that what you would deliver were you elected was universal health insurance. Universal health insurance by 2016. Instead, what we've seen is under your first 2 years in government is in fact over 1,000 people a day leaving private health insurance and coming back into the public system. Instead of people actually, those that need insurance and that you promised that would get public insurance and therefore the service that would go with that, the opposite has been the case. And unfortunately, Minister, we have seen a real lack of management and of leadership in relation to actually bringing our health services around and changing how it operates. Unfortunately, Minister Riley underwent a real change of personality when the election was over, from a man who in this side of the House was going to solve it all to a man on that side of the House and in the government side of the House now who seems to be creating more problems than he has unfortunately dealt with. And we have seen that as well, unfortunately, with the ministerial team, where instead of going from strength to strength and getting a handle on exactly what was happening, we have seen one minister leave the minister's team of junior ministers and indeed be replaced with yourself. And I wish you well with your particular role, and because I do accept that the challenge of reforming our health service is indeed a very difficult one. But unfortunately, and it is one also which naturally will take some time to actually to get on top of. But unfortunately, Minister, from what we've seen before, or seen up until now from your government, there's little there to give confidence that you're actually moving towards that target. Since 2008, we have seen the number of people with health insurance drop from a record of just under 2.3 million to just over 2,100,000, just under 2,100,000 at the end of last year. The very worrying thing, particularly about these figures as well, is the imbalance in terms of who actually has been falling out of the health insurance market in that period in time. And if you look at the graphs, breaking it down by age category, that highlights the particular problem very well here. If you look at the over 80s, in 2008 there were just over 36,000 over 80s with health insurance. That actually has increased against the trend since then, and we now have 44,000 people in that bracket. Likewise, in the 70 to 79 age bracket, it's gone from 94,500 people in 2008 with health insurance to nearly 110,000 now. Similarly, in the 50 to 59 category, gone from 266,000 people with health insurance up slightly to 271,000. Once you get under the 50 age bracket, you see where the pain is really hitting and where the imbalance with our health insurance system is becoming very pronounced. In the 40 to 49 age bracket, it's gone from 320,000 people with insurance to 312. In the 30s, from 367 to 339, and in the 18 to 29 bracket, it's gone from 334,000 to 267,000. And again, there's been 20,000 of those, 20,000 drop in people who are under 17 years of age in that bracket as well. And of course, the issue with that, Minister, is that that's putting more and more pressure on the actual health insurers, because the people who are continuing their health insurance are, first of all, those who are who are a little bit older and maybe more insulated in some ways, or certainly not as exposed as the under 50s to the recession and to debts and to the pressures of raising a family, and therefore have found themselves more able to actually sustain their health cover. But also, it's that category who who are going to be using health insurance more, and therefore see a more immediate need to actually keep it up. Those with families and those who are younger maybe access it in some cases less, and also have several more pressures and demands on their weekly income, and have had to drop out as a result. But if what that means is that for the health insurers themselves, it has become more and more expensive to actually provide health cover, because those that have stayed in it actually are using it. And that, no doubt, has led to the increase in health insurance fees that we've seen. And that indeed has been very pronounced. And again, this is something which Minister Riley indicated he was going to try and tackle when he came to government, to try and bring a halt to the increase that we were seeing in private insurance costs. However, that has not been the case. We've seen in relation to VHI, once again, at the start of this year, there has been announcements of further increases. VHI have increased premiums on 15 of their corporate plans between at the end of December, and indeed have announced that it will increase premiums across 50 plans by 4% to 8.5% on the 1st of March this year. The latest 6% price increase means that the cost of some of the state's largest health insurers policies, typically those held by older people, has risen by almost 70% in little more than 2 years. That's a massive increase by any account. And again, going back to the figures I outlined earlier, showing that those policies held by older people, actually they have stayed in there and actually managed to keep their health insurance up despite that 70% increase in their health insurance. The latest announcement by VHI is their fifth in just over 2 years, And last November, it increased its prices by 3% as well. We've seen similar trends across other healthcare insurers, with Alea, Aviva and Glow Health also significantly increasing their premiums in recent times. And all this means that the cost of health insurance has doubled in the past 4 years, at a time when general inflation has been very low, and indeed health inflation has been actually quite low, and where in the general economy we have seen deflation in many instances. The latest evidence, Minister, of the government's failure really to grapple and get a handle on this issue has been the failure of your current policy in relation to your commitment to protect the 330,000 health insurance customers with lower levels of cover from another increase in the government's health insurance